Hi everyone, welcome along. I guess the cricket season is edging ever closer. It won't be too long till we're playing those friendlies in our first county championship match here at the Kia Oval against Somerset on the 19th of April. So it's a good time, I guess, to catch up with the Surrey Chairman, Richard Thompson, and discuss not just all things Surrey, but a whole host of wider cricketing talking points, I guess, Richard. So it's great to have your time. Thank you for sparing it for us. Let's start off on a celebratory note. Later this year, you will reach 10 years as Surrey Chairman, and of course the club itself celebrates 175 years.
I know, that's the meltdown
of its existence. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was the 22nd of August, 1845.
Very good.
when, meeting at the Horns Tavern in Kennington, just down the road, and it was decided that a club should be formed to represent Surrey in cricket. So, first of all, how big a moment is this for Surrey in its history? And also, what do we have to look forward to in 2020 to mark the milestone?
Well, I think in terms of, we didn't want, 175, it's not kind of a centenary or a bicentenary, but 175 is a real landmark. And I think in a world where authenticity becomes more and more important, it creates an opportunity to remind people of what we have achieved. And why we as a club feel we're more relevant and have a clearer purpose now than probably we've ever had. And I was particularly taken when I went down last year with Andrew Lane, our FD, who kind of looks after our heritage, with Bill Gordon, to the Woking History Centre. This is an incredible archive. And what our forebearers had done brilliantly was to store everything from 175 years ago that's now held in storage. So this is real white glove territory. You've got to put the white gloves on and you ask for certain numbers of things to come through, and they come through, and you're leafing through all the original books, everything, the Constitution, how the club was founded, why the club was founded, from 175 years ago, with all the original manuscripts there, all the clippings from the papers, and it was just extraordinary, and it just inspires you to think, wow, and to read those comments just makes you feel like, okay, this is an important moment for us. And it's an important moment for the club in the sense that there's a lot of change in cricket. And we are going through a very, interesting, exciting time. We've got more players in the England system than we have for a generation, possibly 2 generations. We're highly profitable, and we're about to spend more money than we have in our history to help redevelop big parts of the ground and buy land outside of the footprint for the first time in 175 years. So there's an awful lot going on. And we'd love to draw attention to that, but at the same time, more importantly probably, draw attention to the individuals that got us here, that got us to the point that we can celebrate their achievements and what they've achieved to enable us to be here today.
Are there any moments that really sort of jump off the page? You're talking about looking through the archives. Would it be Don Bradman's last innings here, or Alistair Cook, his last innings here as an England Test cricketer, or even something outside cricket? The first football international between England and Scotland was held at the Oval.
Yeah, and the FA Cups and everything else. So I think there's just such a list, and when we commemorate them around the ground with the brown plaques, and then the chocolate brown plaques are important because that was originally a donation from Royal Dalton, who were based just around the corner. So we found an artisan potter in SC11 to recreate them, and all those moments are recreated around the ground. And you probably think, well, the first Test match was here. The first Centurion, W.G. Grace, scored those runs here. I think the period of the 50s was the most extraordinary of any county, to win that many consecutive championships and to produce that much incredible talent. So I think anybody that was around in the 50s would have been very fortunate to witness that level of success. And then what Adam Hollyoak's team delivered, the most number of trophies we've won in any period from 96 to 2003 was another amazing period. But I think I think it was Jonathan Liew that talked about it in one of his articles, and he's written within our special 175 book, where he talks about he describes the Oval as, were you there moment? I was there moment. And because we've hosted so many of the final tests, 05, 09, 13, and there have been moments that from any sports fan looks back and you know exactly where you were when that moment happened, when the hair was on the back of your neck, where you just felt the emotion take over. That ultimately is the history that this ground has contained, whether they be for England or more importantly for Surrey. But having hosted the first rugby internationals, the first football internationals, 15 FA Cup finals, it is truly an extraordinary ground like no other. So it's important for us to remind people of why this place is so important.
And for the younger fans who maybe have got into cricket maybe in the 2000s, Peterson's 158 in 2005. Broad's incredible spell of bowling on the Friday afternoon in 09. And I remember sitting here actually and having a bottle of beer with him afterwards and just trying to soak it up.
Oh, I know.
Just trying to drink in the atmosphere
No,
of this ground.
absolutely. I remember
really
that
quite special.
success has many fathers and failures an orphan. I remember Martin Bicknell just going up to Broad at lunchtime, just saying top of off stump. That's all you aim for at the Oval, top of off stump. Right, okay, because you're Martin Bicknell. Yeah. And that's what he did. And it was that spell around 2 o'clock after lunch where he just went through them. Yeah. So yeah, there are those moments. You never forget them. I think with cricket as well, what makes it such a special game is you're with someone all day. Like no other sport, and you get those relationships and you form those bonds. We've got the Peter May boys, we've got the guys on the shelf, we've got lots of communities within the Surrey family where you can sense those friendships run deep and are important to them because they do spend a lot of time with each other and they've got a lot in common and their shared love of Surrey.
Well, that takes me on beautifully to a phrase that you use quite a bit, Richard, which is Surrey family. It's quintessentially has always been a family club, but can you sort of unpack that for us a little bit and explain exactly what that means to you, that phrase, the Surrey family?
We're a close club, and I think we're close for a number of reasons in my tenure and in my period of my involvement. Through adversity, we've become close. Through tragedy, we've become very close. Through success, we've become very close. So I think at either end of the emotional spectrum, you draw people together. I think one thing that always sets us apart, always has set us apart, going back to the Bedser twins, the Bicknells, the Currans, the Butchers, just keep reeling them off, the Hollyoaks. So having that, I think, has always instilled a family quality, but always that sense that, Surrey is, the Surrey swagger, other counties have been quite envious of Surrey. That draws you together a little bit. It's kind of us versus the world a little bit.
So, siege mentality.
A little bit. And I think that just draws you together. We're a proper members club. And what I mean by a proper members club, particularly as chairman, I represent the views of the members, a lot of members. And that doesn't necessarily make me popular with other counties or the governing body. But it's important that I do reflect those views and I fight for those views, however difficult that might be. That's what you as chairman are aiming to do, and to protect the best interests of the club and also to see the better interests of cricket. And because Surrey is financially independent, we do have the opportunity to break ranks occasionally and say things others can't or would feel afraid to say that we feel cricket needs to hear. And I've made sure I've done a lot of that over the last 10 years and hopefully that's gained us more influence.
Let's get into some of those topics then, shall we? I guess the two main metrics on which you're judged for success as a county are winning titles, winning trophies, and also producing players for the national team. But of course, cricket is different to football and rugby in that when you produce those players for the national team, then you may not see them for a prolonged period of time. How do we need to look at this? How can cricket maybe try and solve this problem?
Well, I think cricket's an anomaly and it frustrates me greatly. I mean, it's great that we've got so many, the Popes, the Currans, in the Surrey setup now, and they're very young to have broken through at that level. It shows you how exceptional they are, and they look absolutely oven ready. But the fact is, we know we're not going to see them for 10 years now. We're seeing them for half a dozen games, probably tops, a few at the beginning of the year, but you factor in 100 and more ICC tournaments now, it's only going to get less, not more. And there is no other domestic team sport. If you think of football, international periods, there's a break from Premier League. Rugby, not so much the same, but certainly the big rugby Premier League sides see a lot more of their England or international stars than we do. So, frankly, it makes the domestic game too subservient necessarily to the international game. So I do feel that there has to be a reappraisal to make the domestic game more exciting by having those players available more. Because it just doesn't seem fair. I mean, we celebrate the fact, particularly in this room, where we have one board for honours and one board for the Wisden Cricketer of the Year. They're the two boards that really measure our success. If we're delivering Wisden Cricketer of the Year, these are the very best cricketers of their generation in that year, and we delivered a lot of those in the last few years. And then when you look at the honours board, that reflects the trophies we've won. However, you pay a price for that by losing so many of those players. Luckily, we can have a bigger squad than some counties. But as Alec knows, I mean, the conversation I remember having with Graham Full back in 2013 when we took him on, and we just felt, we needed to, look at very hard how we as a club are going to develop our team. And the news I said to Graham said, "It's some great news here. We're in Division 2. And he went, "What does that mean?" "Well, there's no Division 3. So that means we've got time. And I don't care how much time. I do slightly, but at the same moment, I said, "Look, don't rush. Just make these players better. They're not improving. They need to improve. Stewie embraced that. We needed half the squad to be at least our academy players. And the moment of 2018 when we won the championship and the side at Worcester, where 9 of that 11 were through our academy. And there's winning and there's winning. That was the most authentic win since the 50s. So in that sense, having that much of our own talent, you've celebrated, it's great, but at the same time, you know now they're going to play for England, we're going to love that, but it comes at a price, because it doesn't necessarily mean we can replicate that.
I guess, Richard, that is probably magnified by the situation with broadcast rights, because there's such a focus, isn't there, on international cricket. The broadcast rights tend to follow that, and therefore the gap between international cricket and domestic cricket just gets even larger. So how do we try and bring them closer together again?
I mean, I suggested an FA Cup because I felt that bringing 36 counties together, having a knockout, making sure that those weekends all your stars are available, is something romantic about the FA Cup. I'm an AFC Wimbledon fan, and seeing them beat West Ham at home last year was a real, it was a thing. And the fact that Surrey might be drawn at Cornwall and have to play in Truro and we lose, I mean, that's good for the sport in many respects. I'd hate it, but at the same time, I remember when Scotland beat England in the ODI a few years ago. Brilliant moment for the game. It needs the giant killer thing. So I think if you had at least one competition that enabled the England players to play, and that was ring fenced, then that would help. I'm suggesting that as a competition because I just think it has all the ingredients sport needs.
Is there enough room in the calendar to make sure that those players are available?
It would be challenging. That's the big question. Probably at the moment, no. If it was a knockout, when you think most of our domestic competitions are based on the league. So you go back to the old NatWest format, which was a straight knockout. You could go home and away, so you get 2 games. You may lose a big side early on, but that's a risk. But to introduce something like that, one tournament that enables all the key players to play, I think is really important. And when you look at football and rugby, why should cricket be an exception?
Let's discuss the 100. It's well documented that Surrey originally opposed the introduction of a 4th format into domestic cricket, but here we are, it's happening. The tournament kicks off this summer, and Surrey are part of it because the Oval is hosting a men's and a women's franchise in the Oval Invincibles. So just to sort of explain, what is the feeling now around the 100 as far as Surrey are concerned?
Well, we don't want to see an empty Oval. So from that sense, that reflects badly on us if we're not selling the Oval out. So we will absolutely do everything we can to ensure that the 100 is a success here. We don't want to sacrifice the blast. It's very important that doesn't get cannibalised by the 100. So there's a real effort to ensure that doesn't happen. I mean, going back, we opposed 2 things. We opposed the formation of a new T20 competition that then 6 months later then became 100. So there were 2 reasons why we became very unpopular with ECB. One was the fact that we didn't feel the need for 2 T20 competitions. We'd rather have one and supersize it and make it bigger, better, bolder. And then the introduction of a 4th format that absolutely has the right ideal at its base, which is to attract a new audience. I mean, basically, Surrey are already attracting a new audience. I know other venues aren't, but it's a very big gamble for ECB to take. If it comes off, it's free to air. It's going to get everyone talking about cricket. We were the lone voice of dissent. We voted against it purely on the basis that we thought the schedule was already very busy. We felt that our existing blast was attracting the new audience. We didn't want to risk the cannibalisation of that and the 4th format. You've got to remember this is a format not played anywhere else in the world, and sport needs to be relevant, and that means relevant in more than one country. We will do all we can to ensure it's a success here. But we've made our voice. We're a democratic club. We voted against that and the other competition, and as much as that made us unpopular, we're a members club, and I represent the members' wishes, and I know full well that the members would have wanted me to vote that way.
You've alluded to it with phrases like being unpopular and being independent and voicing concerns when you feel you should. How would you assess then the health of the relationship between the ECB and Surrey specifically, but also the ECB and the counties more generally?
2 good questions. I think Surrey at the moment, there are no tensions at the moment. The tensions have been when there have been big decisions, and there aren't big decisions to take at the moment. All the big decisions have been taken, and now this is a case we're in kind of delivery mode now. So I think that tension is released. But the fact is that there is always a tension regardless of who the Surrey chairman is or who the ECB chairman is with Surrey. We're the largest stakeholder by some way. And that does create challenge with the governing body, and it has done for the last 15 to 20 years, more so in the last few years because of so many big decisions being made that we unfortunately disagree with. Independent governance, the 100, the new T20 competition, and these things created a lot of tension. I genuinely believe that you should have one or two stakeholders from the counties on the main ECB board. Damien Collins made that very clear at the Common Select Committee that he couldn't understand why it was fully independent. And I think it's good to have an independent board, but not at the expense of not having at least one or two key voices around that table. And by having no voices around the main table does create tension. So that I'm sure a new chairman might reflect on and think, well, okay, should we bring some of the key stakeholders back in?
Well, with a new ECB chair being appointed, and another person for you to get to know, Richard, what qualities would you like them to express and possess?
I think they need to build some bridges. I think being collegiate is going to be very important. They've got to certainly work well with BCCI, the Indians, because that's a crucial relationship, and they've been in a hiatus for some time now. So it's interesting to see how that plays out. The counties are the ECB are the counties, and I think that's the key message I would send to the new chairman, to recognise that we are the constituent parts. We, from the age of 8 and 9, are producing every England cricketer from those 18, and beyond that to the broader national counties as well. So, we are the production line, and we can't be ignored. We need to be embraced. There is a disparity between the haves and have-nots and the strong and the weak, and you want to reduce probably the dependency that a number of counties have got on the ECB and probably make them slightly more independent of ECB funding. And I think that would be a message to send to the chairman, and to come together and be more of a collective.
What about the notion of partnership, not just with counties, but you mentioned the BCCI and the idea potentially that they could play some of the IPL over here, leveraging the most marketable person in English cricket right now, which is Ben Stokes. Just to explain that a little bit more for us.
Well, I think I don't know, but I'm pretty sure we've probably got more or as many English players playing in the IPL now than we've ever had. So that alone gives us leverage. But when you've got a superstar at the level of Ben Stokes, that gives you very significant leverage. The competition's moving to 3 months now, encroaches even more on our season. And frankly, in any negotiation, why should we allow our players to play in India and Indian players aren't allowed to play in England? So frankly, that's a negotiation. We're now in the strongest negotiating position we've ever been in. So as much as you don't want to stand in the way of the ambitions of those players, and I know playing in the IPL probably contributed to the success of us winning 50-over competition because you're playing under great pressure in front of huge crowds, and that's great for the development of any sportsman. But I think now is the time to have a very big grown-up conversation with the BCCI and say, look, enough's enough. Because if you want to reach a South Asian audience, we know through 2 Champions Trophies hosted here and a World Cup that South Asians want to see their heroes. They want to see Kohli playing. They want to see those guys here. And if they're not, then you find it harder to reach them. So, also leading on from that would be the success of the NFL, the NBA, all these big franchises coming and playing in London. London is probably the global sports capital of the world. And in that sense, it's crying out for that. So, again, but I'm slightly contradicting myself because at the same time, this is a very busy schedule. So if you brought that in, where does that go? What does that compromise? Yeah. But it would be very attractive and very exciting.
Yeah, but as you say, it's not the most sort of seismic, groundbreaking idea ever because US sports have been coming here for a while, NFL, NBA, and now MLB
really well
here
established.
As well. Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that they are extending their brand, if you want to call it that. So, maybe
it seems an obvious thing to do, but it is. Yeah. At the moment, I sense that there's a lot of tension with ICC wanting to have a world event every year coming up, and you think, okay, if you introduce that, how does that work? And the worst part that can happen for any sports fan, it just becomes too much. And then one competition dilutes another. It doesn't feel as special. You lose track of the bilateral competitions. And then the FTP, the Future Tour programme, starts to look so congested. Cricket just starts to lose its relevance. We just start to, gorge and overdose And for example, one of the reasons the Ashes is so exciting is every 4 years. If you decide to go more than that, it wouldn't be as special. It's like the Ryder Cups every 2 years. All the big competitions, you've got to wait for them. It's exciting. Too much of it, I think is a bad thing.
You've got to build up the expectation.
Absolutely, yeah.
You talked about engaging the South Asian community, Indian communities here in the UK. What about other communities that Surrey are trying to reach? Because you've launched a scholarship programme, haven't you?
Yeah, the ACE programme.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Ebony. Well, look, we feel, I remember Surrey 10, 15 years ago being described as the walled garden by our councillors in Lambeth. They just felt we had no real part to play in the community. We didn't really engage with our community. And that really jarred. And we've worked very hard now, and they certainly wouldn't describe Surrey as that now. So it's the sense that we've always had this phenomenal relationship with the West Indian community, principally in Brixton and in the SE11 type postcodes. It's less so now, and the second generation West Indian community don't play cricket in the way that the first generation did. But you feel if we lose the second generation, there won't be a third. I think there is definitely a feeling in SE11 at the moment that we should be reaching out to more, and we're trying to do that. But this is very much cricket's open for business here. And
given what's happened with England being World Cup winners in both men and women's tournaments, I mean, it couldn't be a better time to use cricket as that vehicle.
Absolutely.
It's such a
to reach into your community in a way that cricket
positive
can.
social change. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's just return to the idea of milestones, and as you look back at the first 10 years of your time here as Surrey Chairman, when you came in, shortly after that, you did have some dark days. Financially, it was quite challenging. What happened? How did you sort of flip around the balance sheet to get Surrey on a much sounder financial footing?
I mean, we one of the great, from a commercial perspective, I inherited the OCS stand, which has been absolute phenomenon for us in terms of our conference and events business. So I think without that, we've built a business around that, and I've got my predecessors to thank for that. But by doing that, we probably overreached ourselves, and we were quite unlucky, I think, in either 2010, 2011 with the Pakistan series that effectively got suspended, and that we were back-to-back tests with Lords, and it proved you can't have 10 days of international cricket in 2 weeks in London. And we were just too highly leveraged at a time where we needed our test match and everything to deliver. It didn't, and that really created a problem with us. We got close to breaking our covenants. So at that stage, we had to really reflect and think, right, okay, we need to ensure that can never happen again. So we did reshape the business, had to make a lot of redundancies, make some very tough decisions. One thing I vowed to do is that we wouldn't go back to the kind of size of organisation that we were then. So we've kept it very lean, still a very small executive team that's running a very significant business here now. And we had to take some tough medicine. And we also, things that you knew wouldn't come off immediately, but the sense of, rather than reinventing the wheel, we stood back and said, right, we've got to become the best conference and events business in London, and we've got to be the leading white ball county. So rather than dissipate ourselves into trying to do too many things, in 2010-11 we threw as much energy as we could into white ball cricket, become the home of T20, and to become an absolute go-to venue for conference and events. And those two decisions, along with probably a couple of others, have enabled us to be as strong as we are today. I mean, I think we turned down probably at least £1.5 million of the conference and events business last year because we're at capacity. Hence we're building One Oval Square and the hotel and other things to enable us to have the capacity to soak up here now, because we've become, not, I wouldn't say too successful, but the sense that we're having to turn business away. We don't want to turn any business away, so we want to keep growing. That's why we're having to now kind of grow again.
When we look at 2020, we've got Legends Tours coming up, we've got dinner celebrating the 175th anniversary. There's plenty more besides. A book is coming out, and more events to be announced through the rest of the year. What else do you think Surrey should be thinking about in terms of trying to future-proof the club going forward? Cast your mind forward another 10 years, Richard. Where do you want to see this?
I want to have even more players in the England system, but I want those players playing for Surrey more. I would love to see build on the legacy of what we've done in women's cricket. And I think the changes made over the last year, I think, have kind of to sacrifice the Surrey Stars was frustrating. So I think women's sport generally is absolutely flying at the moment, and absolutely want to be at the lead county and league organisation in terms of women's sport. And with people like Ebony, we will do that. But I think over the next 10 years, by having the hotel, by owning the White House, possibly buying other land around the ground if we can afford to do that, I think One Oval Square will be a phenomenal investment to the club. It will provide fantastic member facilities. We haven't gone too far over the top in terms of corporate facilities. We want members to enjoy this and not just have a load more boxes. I think we'll redevelop the Bedser stand, and that will then enable us to become the largest ground. And I think when you're the largest ground, there are two milestones possibly. One would be, if we're the biggest ground, which I think we will become, then that becomes really the de facto for hosting the biggest matches, if you're significantly bigger than any other. The other, I think, would be to become the largest members club. We're at 13,500 now. There's no reason why we can't go past MCC, which is 17,000. We only had, I think, 9,000 in 2010. So, to have grown by 45% in that period, I'm really proud of. But I think we can keep going. We keep improving the facilities, producing great cricketers, becoming the venue that makes us relevant to our whole community. There's no reason why we can't be the biggest club with the biggest capacity and the most successful. I think we've got the taste for success now. And when you taste it, you don't want to not have to wait another 10 years before you win again.
A lot to look forward to then. Listen, we've covered so many different points there. Thank you so much for your time. So good luck for the season that's coming up in all formats, and of course the 175th anniversary as well.
Many thanks. Cheers. Thank you.